Security is incredibly tight in the nation's capital, 2 days before President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration. As CBS News' Natalie Brand reports, tensions are high after a false alarm triggered a brief lockdown Monday morning.
The Capitol complex went on temporary lockdown, and an inauguration rehearsal was evacuated. It turned out to be a small fire under a nearby highway, but the scare illustrates the heightened state of security in Washington, D.C. Law enforcement and National Guard troops from states across the country are still arriving at the nation's capital ahead of Wednesday's inauguration. President-elect Joe Biden will take the oath of office outside on the West Front, despite the continued security threats in the wake of this month's attack on the Capitol. But access to the public is limited between the security concerns and the pandemic. Even the 20,000 plus troops that have come here to help stand guard must undergo screening. The National Guard says if there's any indication of extremist views, it would be handed over to law enforcement or handled within the chain of command. More than 20 current or former members of the U.S. military or law enforcement have been identified as being at or near the riot on January 6th. Jim McDonnell is the former L.A. County Sheriff.
This is a very, very important day in American history, and we all have an obligation to ensure that it is as safe as possible for everybody, not only in D.C., but across the United States as well.
Less than 48 hours before he's set to be sworn in, President-elect Biden visited a food bank in Philadelphia in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, packing boxes on this day of service. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge joins me now with more. Hi there, Catherine. So last week, federal prosecutors said that they had strong evidence that rioters who breached the Capitol intended to capture and assassinate elected officials. But a day later, the Justice Department walked that back. Where does the investigation stand, and what's the disconnect here?
Well, that issue, where it stands right now, is that the acting U.S. Attorney, Michael Sherwin, he leads the sedition task force here in Washington, has told reporters that there's no direct evidence of kill or capture teams on Capitol Hill. But this is the caveat. The investigation is ongoing. CBS News was one of the first news organizations to report that investigators were exploring whether some of the rioters brought these zip ties, like makeshift handcuffs, in order to harm lawmakers or to take them hostage. The person who's become front and center in this whole discussion is Jacob Chansley. I think most people know him as the QAnon shaman. A state prosecutor alleged that he was specifically part of a group to kill and assassinate lawmakers. But then the U.S. Attorney, the acting U.S. Attorney here in Washington, Michael Sherwin, effectively walked that back, saying that's just not what the evidence shows, but at this point in time.
Well, after the storming of the Capitol, you reported on the intelligence concerns raised after rioters gained access to congressional computers. Catherine, what do we know about the laptop stolen from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office?
Well, we were among the first to report, Elaine, that investigators were very concerned about electronic files that were stolen from the offices of lawmakers, and they were trying to understand the national security implications. And today, a statement of fact that I have right here was released on the person you see on the screen, Riley Williams. This is really a fascinating document, and if people at home have the time to read these, I would really encourage it, because some of the information is really, frankly, a little mind-blowing. In this particular case, it talks about a witness coming forward to the FBI, and it states, the witness claimed Williams intended to send the computer device to a friend in Russia, who then planned to sell the device to the SVR. This is the Russian Foreign Intelligence Agency. And according to the witness, the transfer of the computer device to Russia fell through for unknown reasons, and Williams still had the computer device or had destroyed it. I mean, that is something that I've never seen in the 2 decades that I have covered this beat. An American citizen stealing or allegedly stealing an electronic file from the Speaker of the House and then intending to sell it to the intelligence service, or at least allegedly intending to sell it to the intelligence service of a foreign adversary. So the breach of the Capitol goes beyond what you see on the screen and the physical damage. There are some real national security implications to what also happened that day.
Right. I think you're absolutely right, Catherine. The fact that these are allegations about American citizens
Correct.
is what is so difficult for a lot of us to kind of get our heads around. Catherine, how is the military addressing fears of a potential insider attack with more than 20,000 National Guard troops in D.C. for inauguration? Because this is another aspect of this story that is really, frankly, just so difficult to comprehend, just this possibility.
I think the most important thing for folks at home to know is that the acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, has said that they're not seeing credible or specific intelligence about an insider threat with the National Guard who are charged with securing the Capitol on Inauguration Day. But all of that said, they have tasked the FBI along with the Secret Service to be vetting the National Guard troops who will be working that day. All of this is a reflection of the fact that about 24 current and former military or law enforcement have been arrested and face charges in connection to the breach of the Capitol on January 6th.
Well, while we have you, Catherine, I also want to ask about the acting defense secretary's order to appoint Michael Ellis, considered to be a Trump loyalist, as the top lawyer for the NSA. Catherine, who is Ellis and what was his role with the administration before this?
Well, Ellis worked as a senior legal advisor for the National Security Council. His backstory is that he had also worked with the Republicans when they led the House Intelligence Committee. What has my attention is that Ellis was the one who was very involved in the review of John Bolton's book and the alleged disclosure of classified information. And my antenna are up in that sense if I wonder if Ellis has been placed in what amounts to a career job because the issue of the Bolton book and the classified information is still open. You probably recall back in October, the court said that the government could proceed with that case. So it's yet to be seen. And this administration, this is just my sort of educated view, this administration may want to have someone embedded, if you will, to take on that issue to its conclusion because of the president's strong feelings about the actions that Bolton took with that book.
All right, CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. Catherine, always great to have you reporting. Thank
You're welcome.
you.